My goodness.
Talk no more, none of that shit. I'm gonna let you say
Let's go, hey.
Got me started, wrist frames carded, pull up double parking, don't even pay like I'm the owner, my young niggas retarded.
Yo, what up, guys? We're on the clock.
We are back.
It's Caleb back again with Julian, finally in the flesh. How's 23 treating you, pal?
Dude, it's the Michael Jordan year, which is why, along with the fact that it is Halloween tomorrow, for those of you who are probably going to be listening to this a week from now when it comes out, we were recording on October 30th.
About like November 8th or something like that. It'll come out, or like that Monday of that week, the 6th or something like that.
Well, so this isn't just a Bugs Bunny costume. It's actually a Toon Squad Bugs Bunny costume, an homage to both, the fact that I'm entering my Michael Jordan year and the fact that, it's Halloween tomorrow. So figured we'd spice it up a little bit,
You're always with the fits. It's a great part of the podcast. I've missed it the last two, to be honest. You guys will see you guys saw the ACC pod, and you'll see the Big East pod probably is already on the feed, so go check those out. But today we're getting into another pair of conferences. We got another Power 5 conference paired with another little mid-major favorite of ours. We got the Big Ten and the Missouri Valley Conference. Resident Missouri Valley Conference fans here. We both are in love with the MVC, and all the talent they have to offer. So we're gonna dig into both of them. Without further ado, how are we feeling about the Big Ten? As a resident, Wisconsin Badger, we'll save the talk for the end, but kind of start, some of the biggest rivals and, the home of, most of my favorite sports teams, if you didn't know, the Fighting Illini of Illinois, brought back, a good amount of their players, most of their key players, that is, if not all of them, bringing back Terrence Shannon Jr., Coleman Hawkins, and some other guys that, were, role players for that team, but showed up big throughout the end of the year, especially guys like Dane Danja, Sincere Harris. Obviously, a good team. How are you kind of feeling about, Terrence Shannon Jr., Coleman Hawkins, how they kind of look in the Big Ten landscape?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good year to bring a lot of your guys back in the Big Ten, because so many of the top players are like onto greener pastures. We lost Jalen Pickett for Penn State. I don't know why that's the first name I brought up, but Trace Jackson Davis is gone. Edie is still here, but
Hunter Dickinson,
just a lot of
the Big 12.
Yeah, Hunter Dickinson's gone. You lost Jet Howard, who was a big deal for Michigan. Michigan State is like kind of bringing some guys back, but I think they're still a little bit
back, but it's just like they lost Hauser, and it's like, we'll get to them.
So it's gonna be the Big Ten. I think also it needs a bounce back year, so they need like one of these teams to like do something in the tournament. I mean, it was pretty embarrassing what they did in the tournament last year. I mean, obviously everyone's notably going to say Purdue, but like no one else really did that much. And they sent a lot of teams.
And team from this conference in the tournament last year, and it's just like they weren't really that thrilling.
No, and like Illinois, I think is exciting. Like I like what they have. I mean, I think Terrence Shannon is probably going to be the most dynamic player in the conference. But I don't know what it is about Illinois, but they never like seem to excite me when it comes to March. Like they're a great regular season team every single year. I can't ever really get excited about them because I've never like every year they're a high seed in March and every year they disappoint in like some manner. You know what I mean? Like I don't know how I can get excited about this team, even though they have like a lot of really, really talented players. And I love their role players. Like Dane Jagen, Sincere, is it Carey or Harris? It's
Harris.
Sincere Harris, isn't it? Yeah. Like those are two really fun role players that I love watching get spot minutes and like show up more and more throughout the season for them. I know they brought in Monty Hansberry, who should be pretty good. I just
Brought in a good amount of transfers too. I mean, bringing in Marcus Domask from Southern Illinois.
yeah, that's a big one for them.
You got Justin Harmon from Utah Valley. So they brought in some good guards with some size. They brought in Quincy Greer from Oregon.
Yeah,
So, brought in some good talent to pair with some of those guys. I mean, there's a guy that we both love for Illinois, and Ty Rogers, who I'm counting on to kind of have, a breakout season. I have him slated as my most improved player. Not really from a sense of, putting up a ton of numbers, but his versatility is something that really pops on tape. The ability to guard pretty much 1 through 4, sometimes even 5, put the ball on the floor, create offense for others. Attacking the basket's pretty solid. Just really needs a stable jump shot. And he's a crucial part of this roster that, Coleman Hawkins is also a guy that, in a vacuum could be considered a candidate for most improved player in this conference, because if he puts together any sort of consistency for more than, 6 games at a time,
yeah,
he's a player of the year type of candidate. With his ability to shoot the ball, switchability on defense, put the ball on the floor, the big man spot, and he can really pass the ball. So it's going to be interesting to see kind of how they come together. Obviously, Terrence Shannon Jr. is going to be kind of running the show, but Dane Dage is going to get you a good post touch every now and then, and averaged 1.04 points per possessions last year, and shot around 63% from the field. So, he's hyper efficient, going to get you a bucket when you need it. Domask had a great year for Southern Illinois, like I said, coming in as a high efficiency player, 1.25 turnovers per game last year. So, I like the outlook of their roster. I think they have a ton of depth. You brought up Amani Hansberry, who I think is going to be one of the bigger impact freshmen in this conference. I don't know. We'll have to see. I have this team as one of my 3 teams to beat in this conference.
It's like the spacing is going to be an issue, honestly. Like that's the biggest thing I'm concerned with.
Terrence Shannon Jr. to shoot like he did at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, and we need we're gonna need Coleman Hawkins and Ty Rogers to like take that step with the jump shot and consistency. Because I think like if you have those 3 guys spraying from deep, they have enough ability to get inside, and I don't think the conference is quite as big dominant now that a lot of the guys outside of Zach Edey are gone. That like honestly, if you can shoot in the Big Ten, you're probably going to win the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen, Michigan State, who's had, mentioned Hauser. I mean, having a stable 3-point threat in this conference leads to a good amount of wins. We got Patrick McCaffrey for Iowa and Sanford for Iowa. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how they kind of stack up, but I think that positionally they match up really well with just about any team in the country with their ability to defend multiple positions. I mean, if they're rolling out a lineup out there, you even got Dry Gibbs Lawthorne, who can come in and get a couple minutes here and there. But I mean, if you're rolling out a lineup of Harris, Shannon, Rogers, Hawkins, and Danger, and then you have Hansberry, Domask, Harmon, Greer, they're gonna have a lot of depth, and I just don't think that that's really like a common thing in this conference this year, is teams having being 8 or 9 deep.
No, and that's what's gonna, and especially in the Big East is a very grindy Big East. Big Ten is generally a very grind them out conference. A lot of the teams are knocking each other off pretty regularly. There's not usually a dominant force, so to have that depth is going to be pretty key for them this year.
Yeah, I mean, kind of pivoting into a talking point that you had there about the front court depth in this conference. we're going to pivot to, some of the big guys that they're going to be going up against. And, it's hard to talk about big men in the conference without talking about Kalal Ware. Obviously brought his talents over from Oregon, the number 2 transfer in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. What are you thinking about Kalal Ware's change of scenery to Indiana? I kind of like it.
I think it's a great move. I don't think, especially given that there's kind of with Biddle, Dante, and then you also had Kalaware there, it's kind of a logjam over at Oregon. And I mean, Dante was it wasn't seeming like they could play him alongside Dante effectively. And like he's not going to start over in Folly Dante. I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. So I think he kind of had to. And the good thing about Indiana is obviously they've got the giant gaping Trace Jackson Davis shaped hole in the front court. But I also think that like they're that like they do still they do still have Malik Renaud. He's going to be my most improved player. But I do think that they're going to need to rely on more than just one guy, given that they lost to Chafino, Race Thompson's gone. Like Indiana's doing a lot of replacing this year. And so I think for Kalel Ware, it's an opportunity to really come in and say, look, like, you can lean on me. I'm going to be your floor spacing big. I'm going to play alongside Malik Renaud, who's a primarily post-operative guy who likes to, get a lot of his work done down there. And I think it's going to be a really fun pairing. And I really like Indiana this year, honestly. Like, Mike Woodson has done a fun
about, the superstar recruit that they brought in, the 10th player in the country, and Mackenzie Mbako, who, I mean, adds like another level of, size to that front court and skill. I mean, Renault's a relatively skilled player, doesn't have an exceptional jump shot. But I'm sure it's something he's been working on. We know Ware can shoot the ball, and can put the ball on the floor on occasions. But Mackenzie Mbako is kind of that, power wing that really not a lot of teams in the country can say that they have. I mean, we talked about Omaha Bielu for Iowa State and kind of a similar vein. But if he can come in and, take a hold of this team day one in terms of, doing a little bit of everything, scoring the ball, being aggressive, putting a body on somebody, he's going to have a lot of mismatches, due to the fact that they're just going to have to put the bigger guys on the floor on Renaud and Ware. And if he can shoot the ball relatively around, 30 to 35% from 3, which I mean, it's not his strong suit, he's going to have a great freshman year. And he's going to be somebody that we're going to be talking about, after March in June and July.
Easily. I think the big question with Indiana is kind of what happens to the backcourt. Like, I'm trying to pull it up now, but
huge step. They obviously finally got Gabe Cupps. It seems like he was in high school for like 10 years. So he's clearly going to be a guy who's going to be a point guard of the future, but there's a relatively young backcourt. Caleb Banks is going to have a really big year for them. I just don't see, in terms of like premier talent wise, what this backcourt's really going to look like. Trey Galloway is a guy who, I mean, is going to take care of the ball, but you're not going to rely on for scoring a lot at a high volume, and didn't really have a ton of reps last year. So I assume that he'll kind of presume that role as, kind of the lead playmaker on that roster. But other than him, it's kind of a toss up. Expect Trey Galloway to probably get the nod at starting point guard. But other than that, I don't really see like a crazy outlook for their backcourt. I think it's going to be a very front court dominated team, which I mean, it's not a bad thing. Cause I mean, we were talking about with Illinois, it's going to be Danger, it's going to be Hansberry, it's going to be Hawkins at their most successful points. So Indiana is going to be a team that's going to match up well with them. I think we're going to go through a couple of teams that'll match up pretty decently with Illinois. And Purdue is kind of the team to beat. So if Purdue's the team to beat, is this a squad that you believe in? Kind of knock it off. I don't know if they have the backcourt depth, kind of like we were saying.
Yeah, I mean, like, honestly, I don't want to have faith in Purdue, man. I just can't. Like, I'm defeated. as in terms of like expecting anything from that team. Every year, like I always underrate them. And in the regular season, like I'm always wrong. And then when the tournament comes, like they don't do anything.
Get yourself
Like,
up.
I mean, I can't really justify Purdue being the best team in this conference anymore. Like, have they made a Sweet 16 recently? Can we like I'm serious. Like I'm sure they have made like one. I've never seen them in the Elite Eight. They don't do anything, man.
Yeah. The Matt Painter era has kind of been one of, really great regular season appearances. But, they made the tournament, since 2015, they've only missed it. I don't think they've missed it. They haven't missed the tournament since 2015. But they've only made, they've made the Sweet 16 4 times, but they've only made the Elite Eight once in 2019.
There you go. I mean,
four out of, 8, 50% exchange rate on the Sweet 16. But I mean, that's not really what you're expecting by a school who is, got top line players like a Zach Edey, and Jaden Ivey and other guys like that. I don't know. There'll be an interesting thing. Obviously, they got Fletcher Lawyer back, who we know is a knockdown shooter. Brought in Colvin, who I like, to add to that backcourt. Trey Kaufman-Wren's decent player. Hopefully, going to take a step forward. Will Berg, some good front court depth. But, I mean, other than that, they're going to be relying on a lot of returners to take steps that I just don't know that they're going to take. And I mean, it's just going to really rely on the back of can, Zach Edey run it back as National Player of the Year. And, I mean, his numbers last year were just unbelievable. I mean, shot 60% from the field, 1.137 points per possession. Just doesn't do anything besides rebound, block shots, and put ball in hoop, which I mean, at this level is what you really want. Big man. But I don't know. It's definitely not a fun style play to watch. I mean, to put it in perspective, like finding the next guy, he's got 105 rebounds on Clifford Omiori, who is the next like guy in like the sheet that I have, which is like all these returners and guys coming into the Big Ten, based off the years last year. 105 more rebounds.
That's ridiculous. That's
one of the best in the country.
Yeah, and I mean, but the thing is like they also kind of got exposed a bit. I would not even a bit. They got exposed against
them up. What can they do?
Well, but you don't let them post them up. The guards clearly don't. I mean, Gillis and Lawyer were not comfortable getting the ball into them when Fairleigh Dickinson, a team who, for the record, didn't have a guy above 6'5", put a box and one on. I mean, do you think that's, there's any merit to that going forward, that's going to be an ongoing issue this year? Teams are going to look and say, look, like Fairleigh Dickinson, a team who probably wasn't supposed to be in the tournament, who only got in because a team transferred up to D1. I think it was Merrimack transferred up and wasn't allowed to play. And that's the only reason Fairleigh Dickinson even was in the tournament. Like, knocked off a 1 seed for the second time in NCAA history by literally just putting 4 dudes around Zach Edey and saying, I dare you to pass it in here. I mean, what's to stop other teams with more talent than Fairleigh Dickinson, all respect to them, by the way, from doing that? I don't think there's an answer. They didn't bring anybody, like they brought in Colvin, but like other than that, it's the same crew. I don't know, man. I'm like
I think
very, very out on Purdue.
There's top 3 in the Big Ten, but they don't win the Big Ten tournament, and they maybe lose in the round of 32.
No, I would say like I'm much more confident in Indiana and even Illinois, who I just like ripped on for being bad in the tournament, notoriously making it to the Sweet 16, than I have faith in Purdue. Honestly, we haven't even talked about the team that I think is probably going to make it furthest in the Big Ten in the tournament, and that's Michigan State.
We can go there if you would like.
I mean,
if you're talking about guys, if teams that match up well with them, Michigan State kind of has a little bit of everything that you're kind of looking for and maybe I had them as one of my teams to beat just because I think they brought back so many guys that were so important to their roster last year. Brought back Matty Suzuko, Malik Hall's back, Tyson Walker's back,
Hoggard's back.
Jaden Akins is back.
AJ Hoggard's back.
So they kind of brought back everything, and then I love the things that they added, bringing in Cohen Carr and Xavier Booker.
Ridiculous.
Two guys that I'm super high on in this class. And I didn't even talk about Jeremy Fears, who's just probably not going to get a ton of minutes because their backcourt is so deep. I mean, they really have, 3 premier guards. It'll be interesting to see how this team honestly stacks up with the rest of the country, because they might be the most talented team in the conference, I think. They're another team that is like one of these rarities in this conference where we're really going to stop at guy 4 and say, what else do they really have that's going to be competent? Or, Michigan State's going to be 7-8 deep, very similar to Illinois. What's kind of your feelings about them? You said that you think that they're your favorite.
Honestly, maybe not right.
I mean, he counts for at least 5 wins and at least a win in March.
I'm not going to say that I think that they're going to be the best team in the regular season, but out of all these teams that maybe Ohio State, because they have a couple of guys we'll get to later, but I think Michigan State is the team that is by far the best prime to make an Elite Eight tournament run in the Big Ten. And I don't think it's particularly close, honestly. We talk about guard play, important in college basketball. Hoggard, Akins, and Walker were like 3 premier guards in college basketball last year. Michigan State started off the season with a really tough schedule. They beat some teams they weren't supposed to beat at the start of the season last year, and they had a decent tournament run. And they're bringing back 4 of their 5 starters and adding 2 5-star recruits. I just don't see a world. I could see them actually winning the Big Ten. I just think that at the end of the day, even if they don't, especially, given Tom Izzo's track record, they're by far the most prime team for March. They're going to be really good, man. And I think early in the season, it's not going to be like it was last year, where it caught people by surprise that they were giving Kentucky and Gonzaga and I think Duke problems. They're going to be expected to give these teams problems this year.
We haven't even talked about the fact that just Cohen Carr straight up is a dog. My freshman of the year. I think he's a guy that, is similar to Cam Whitmore last year for me, is one of these, extremely talented and gifted athletes who, is a consistent jump shot away from being a top 5 pick. We didn't see with Whitmore last year for a plethora of reasons. But Cohen Carr's coming into the year healthy, which is something we couldn't say about Whitmore last year. He's got a coach that actually likes him. And I don't know, sky's the limit with him. I think Xavier Booker is a similar scenario. It's just going to be about how much minutes these guys get from a draft perspective. But, I have them slated as my top recruiting class, and so do you. I think just the 2 of them and, Fears, looming in the background, 3 years down the line, we're going to be talking about him in the same vein as that we're talking about Hoggard and Akins and Walker. He's in that same class of these premier run the show type of guards. Just like a side note, I mean, the guard class in the Big Ten is going to be so fun to watch in 3 years. I mean, we're going to be seeing Gabe Cupps going at Jeremy Fears. We're going to see Draw Gibbs Lawthorne. We're going to see Deshaun Harris Smith. Hopefully we'll still be around. We're going to see George Washington III for Michigan. I mean, there's just a plethora of these talented small guards that are going to be program builders that, I'm just pumped about the future of college basketball alone. But I think that there's some real talent in this conference. Identifying it here with Michigan State, that just have so much. And I think it's so hard to count them out as a team that's just going to win.
Yeah. Cohen Carr, I mean, you said top 5 pick if the shot goes. I think even if the shot doesn't work yet, he's still a lottery pick, honestly. He's that good.
100%. Couldn't agree more. Pivoting to the team that, I had as kind of, slash slash best recruiting class, Michigan State slash Ohio State. I know you're a big Scotty Middleton guy, so I'll just kind of give you the floor about the 6'7" guard from from Miami, Florida.
Yeah, I mean, for the last 3 years, we've had Ohio State have these guys who come in as freshmen. Scotty being the third of the three. We had Malachi Branham, who, took a little bit to figure it out, but, turned into a star. You had Bryce Sensabaugh, took a little bit to figure it out, turned into a star. I think Scotty Middleton's just straight up better than those two guys. Like the off the dribble stuff, the length, the ability to shoot the ball. I mean, I think on this Ohio State team, like he just fits in the Bryce Sensabaugh role, except he's not a post scorer. He's an off the dribble shoot. And I think they've brought a few guys back.
Sensabaugh is or was
He's much what?
more plug and play.
Easily. Yeah. I think Sensabaugh is very a niche player, whereas Scotty Middleton, you give him the ball, you throw him in your lineup, and I think he can drop 20 points pretty much anywhere in the country. And look, I don't know how good Ohio State's going to be. I know they brought some guys back. They brought back Okpara. They brought back Zed Key. So
Gale,
they have who as well?
Gale,
Yeah.
Big Roddy Gale.
Yeah, they brought back Roddy Gale. So they brought back some guys. And I think they're going to be good. I don't think that the guys around Scotty are quite as good as some of the supporting cast that some of the other stars in the conference have. But I mean, look, is it crazy to say Ohio State's a tournament team? Absolutely not. Deshaun Harris-Smith, we'll see how he gets on, but I think
I mean, they're gonna be fine.
Yeah, they're gonna be a good team. I just don't think I think they're kind of in that next tier in the Big Ten. Like I'd say probably like Purdue, Michigan State, Illinois, Indiana are like the upper echelon of this conference. But I think Ohio State's and Michigan as well are kind of lingering there in Iowa. There's a couple of others, but they're Ohio State for sure is lingering there. Well, I didn't
Sleep on my. I won't tolerate it
on purpose. But yeah, Wisconsin's in that tier too. But there's there's that next four.
I mean, and then there's kind of Nebraska, Northwestern, Minnesota. But I mean, even those teams are solid. Nebraska maybe not, but Maryland, Minnesota and Northwestern.
Penn State and Rutgers we didn't even mention as well.
Yeah, Penn State get into those bags. Yeah,
but I mean, Ohio State probably is a lower tier single digit seed who like I said, if Scotty Middleton does what I think he can do, you don't want to face him.
They're a team that you don't want to play as an 8 seed going against.
No, not at all. Because they've got a guy who I believe will be able to just take over again.
Yeah, I mean, they brought in Devin Royal, who's a phenomenal athlete, 6'7" forward. Bringing in Tayson Chapman, who's actually higher ranked than your guy Scotty Middleton. He's a dynamic guard from Minneapolis. They also brought in Austin Parks, who's a solid player as a big man, to kind of give him depth behind Okpara and Zed Key. They're going to be a good team. I just don't think that they're going to be that premier title contender that we're used to seeing sometimes with these Ohio State teams. I think this is just a younger squad, and I think next year will be their year, and I'm sure they'll get another Scotty Middleton. Again, I haven't dug too much into the 2024 recruiting class yet, but I will.
Yeah, and look, we'll see, but I think let's get into some of the meat of this conference, because this is a deep conference, by the way. The Big Ten, it's interesting. That's the thing that makes the Big Ten so much fun, is that there's so many teams towards the bottom that can very easily pull off upsets over teams at the top, and they do it regularly. So many teams in the Big Ten last year finished, other than Purdue, finished with 11 or 12 losses because they just were losing to other Big Ten teams.
I mean, a team that consistently surprises people within Big Ten play, in my opinion, is Rutgers. I mean, they finished about what was their overall win-loss? They finished in the bottom part of the conference last year, the bottom half. But like you said, from Purdue down, in between Purdue and Nebraska, Ohio State struggled within the conference. Minnesota struggled within the conference at 2-17 for Minnesota. Hopefully they'll have a bounce back here. We'll talk about them in a bit. But I mean, Indiana 12-8, Northwestern 12-8, Maryland 11-9, Penn State 10-10, Michigan State 11-8, Illinois 11-9, Iowa 11-9, Wisconsin 9-11, Rutgers 10-10, Michigan 11-9, Nebraska 9-11. That's a freaking bloodbath, dude.
It's insane. These teams just like beat the living. I wonder if that's why they're so bad in the tournaments, because they just beat the living hell out of each other for an entire season of conference play.
Very well might be. Very well might be. Pivoting to one of those teams I was like hinting at the beginning is Rutgers. I don't think that this is like the most talented Rutgers team. I think they were maybe a bit better last year in the backcourt, but bringing in a guy in Gavin Griffiths from Connecticut, 6'7" guard / wing, tweener kind of guy. And then, I mean, it's hard to talk about this team without, just talking about Clifford Omoyori, who's probably one of my favorite players in the entire conference. The 6'11" big man out of Benin City, Nigeria. Really just one of my favorite players to watch in college basketball. One of the hardest working, hardest playing players you're really ever going to see in college basketball. I just love his game. Prolific shot blocker, prolific offensive rebounder, solid post presence, gets you a bucket. I thought he could have been a draft pick last year, but I was clearly in the minority. This year he's automatically eligible, and I think will get at least a two-way contract, if not be a second-round draft pick. What are your thoughts about Rutgers? I know it's not the most, glamorous roster, but I think that there's still some real meat here with these guys. They also brought in Noah Fernandez from UMass, who's a solid player. There's a lot to like here.
Yeah, they got gutted a bit by the transfer portal and by guys leaving. But I mean, it's tough to count out a team with the guy who I think is probably the most talented big man in the conference. And not just sorry, Zach Edey, you're just tall, bro. And Omarui, I mean, you summed him up perfectly. Like, I don't have anything to add on that. They also brought him Mo. I can't even. Is it Mag or Wag? I looked at it and then I looked away. Mo Mag. Who's going to be an interesting forward for them. I think honestly, they're one of these teams where, as far as Omarui takes them, I think there's another team in the conference that we'll talk about later that's kind of like this as well. Where as far as their big man takes them, and it's not. That's where they're gonna go. They're gonna have a stacked recruiting class next year. So I think they're pretty excited for that. This is kind of just like the Omarui year,
Yeah, I agree. Do we want to talk about that team that's gonna go as far as their big man will take them? And I'm assuming Michigan Wolverines.
No, it was a different one I was talking about, but Michigan's a good one too. It's funny with Michigan because it's a different big man than the one that took them as far as they were going to go last year. Look, I know Hunter Dickinson leaving is a big loss, but they still have Terrace Reed. Everything's going to be okay, Michigan fans. You have Terrace Reed. And like Juwan Howard is still a phenomenal coach. I know Jace Howard is not quite Jet Howard, and that stinks. But look, Buffkin was a loss too. I think they're still going to be good. But it is a case of how far can Terrace Reed Jr. take them, because that roster has been kind of gutted.
Second's a great player. They brought back Doug McDaniel.
Yeah.
And they have an underrated recruit in Leah, who I think is going to come in and be an impact player as a freshman. 6'9" forward. It would be interesting to see what his role is to start the year. I've heard a lot of good things. Haven't watched much of his game, but a talented player, has the potential at 6'9" to be a guy who could pass, dribble, shoot, defend multiple positions. So, those guys are always enticing from a draft perspective, but what his impact will be as a freshman, it'll be interesting to see. Other than that, not the most talented or like highly touted Michigan roster. But again, I just wanted to harp on the fact, I thought you were talking about maybe them, but I think Taurus Reed's going to have one of the biggest seasons in college basketball. Just an absolute friggin' monster on the inside. 6'10", probably goes like 275 soaking wet. He's going to be a beast.
Yeah, and I think that, like we talked about, the big men departed. They moved on to greener pastures. One of their own big men left. And I think honestly, like,
for it, I think they needed to move on from the Hunter Dickinson era at Michigan.
yeah, I think they did too. But I think that honestly, the losses of Jet and Kobe hurt them a bit more because the guys that they have, especially defensively, um, it's a bit tough to replace them. I know they got Amari Burnett, and I know they've got Nakamwa, who are like a couple of decent players, but it's just tough to replace guys like that, who were both first round picks. And look, I'm not saying that they're going to be bad. They're going to be in that middle echelon of teams. Like they're going to be another. It's going to be another decent season. They'll go to the tournament probably, and like be a 7 seed. Woohoo! Cheers from Michigan, man.
I don't know if they'll be a 7 seed, but I think they'll definitely be competitive within the Big Ten. I like them more as kind of being a sleeper team that could sneak up on some people. And if you want to go with the team that you thought is going to get carried by their big men, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, dude. So you know this probably from our draft that we did, but I'm a big Julian Reese guy. I absolutely love his game. I think he's an absolute dog down low. And I think that a lot of what they do is going to be based on what yeah, sorry. This is Maryland that we were talking about here. And I think a lot of what they do is going to be based on what Julian Reese does and what kind of steps he takes forward. I really, really, really would like to see him develop a little bit more touch. Because I think that's an area of his game around the rim that needs to be oh my God, Deshaun Harris Smith goes to Maryland, not freaking Ohio State. I don't know why I thought that. I apologize. But they brought back Dante Scott. They brought back Jameer Young. They brought back like some of the core guys around him, which I think is super, super important. But he was their guy.
That guy, that dog. In my opinion, Deshaun Harris Smith's a highly touted recruit. I think he'll have a phenomenal freshman year, and I think he'll be a guy that we're talking about later in the year. Once we see what he kind of looks like. At the college level, it's hard to kind of judge guards translating from high school to college just with the change of pace. They're players that really rely more on speed than big men do. But a guy that I think is going to be able to come in and impact their team day one is Jamie Kaiser Jr., the 6'4" out of Virginia. Two-way slasher with a little bit of shooting sprinkled in there. I think he's just going to be able to impact the game in a lot of small ways that you're kind of looking for out of a freshman. And I think he's going to give him a lot of quality minutes, and I think his athleticism is really going to pop, and people are going to enjoy him, especially from a draft perspective. It'll be interesting to see kind of how his season shakes out, what his minutes look like right away, but I have an inkling that he's going to start day one and will be playing a good bit. They got Braden Pierce, big man out of Georgia, who should be interesting to see where he kind of fits into the front court depth. Obviously brought in Matty Traore from New Mexico State, who's a big hoss. He's a big body that they can slap down there and play alongside Reese, or back him up, however they see fit. But I like this Maryland squad. I think that they have a good collection of talent, and it's another one of those teams that is 7 or 8 deep.
Yeah, but I do think it's going to be like, how far can Julian Reese take them this year? Because I think like at the end of the day, he's got to be the guy. They ran a ton of their offense through him last year. They're probably going to run a ton of their offense through him again, and I think the good thing is they've got more around him this year, so like he shouldn't have to shoulder, you know, 100% of the load, but he'll still be shouldering a good 80-90% of it. And I'm excited about Maryland this year, man. I think they're going to be a good team, and I keep saying that I'm excited about like 90% of these Big Ten teams.
Yeah. I think we both
You
just
know,
same thing at the same time.
the Big Ten's really really good.
Yeah, I think we both agreed that a lot of these teams are pretty good. Um, Speaking of another team that's going to run their offense probably about 80% through one guy, Minnesota is a team that is kind of retooling from obviously a really disappointing last year, like I kind of highlighted earlier, only going 2-17 in Big Ten play. And you just can't do that, even if you do go 7-5 out of it. You can't go 1-9 on the road and expect to be a good team in college basketball. But they got Dawson Garcia back, who's obviously a great college basketball player. Does a little bit of everything, good rebounder, good back to the basket scorer, can hit this jumper. But they added Mike Mitchell from Pepperdine.
Great ad.
I think is a phenomenal fit with this roster that needs a little bit of scoring punch in the backcourt. Sharpshooter, if you aren't familiar with this game, a lot of fun to watch, can do a little bit of everything, can score at all three levels when he needs to, can facilitate, but you're normally going to rely on him to score the ball. And then they also brought in Cameron Christie, who's not an unfamiliar face to this conference in terms of his family. He's the brother of Max Christie, who is a Michigan State stud who now plays for the Los Angeles Lakers. We'll see if he's got, the same defensive mindset and has some of that same potential. Is ranked 80th in his class. So definitely, the hype is there. I don't know if maybe we'll find out if that's due to the name or his game, but I think he's going to be able to back it up. A hard-nosed defender, just like his brother, played high quality ball in AAU. He's kind of has a chip on his shoulder being that younger brother. It'll be interesting to see. And they also brought in Kristaps Kianis, who I think if he can get minutes will be a stud for Minnesota. Pass dribble shoot, stretch four, who, out of Klaipėda, Lithuania, is another one of those international guys that if you went and listened to the NCAA International Takeover podcast that I did on the War Room with KJ Pistons, you know that this is just a common theme throughout the country is that, every team's got some kid. Leah from Michigan is an international player. I can't remember where he's from, but just tons of talent all across the country, and outside of it especially. So Leah's from Argentina. So it's going to be dope to see, the kind of the international takeover that takes place. And, some of it's going to take place here in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean the Minnesota backcourt is significantly more exciting this year. They brought back Lipsy as well, who I think is a pretty solid player for them. But Mike Mitchell just brings a whole new dynamic to this team. Mike, I'm happy you were out of Pepperdine. I'm sorry you had to play there. I know it was hard, but you're in hopefully greener pastures now.
Julian hates Pepperdine.
Yeah, we talked about this on the West Coast Conference pod.
Humble plug. Go check that episode out with Tyler Rucker.
Speaking of, we already did a little discussion in the A10 pod about how VCU's head coach has come over to a.
We did, but we didn't have Tyler Metcalf.
Well, but we are. I'm bringing us over to the fact that their old coaches.
Normally I do them, so I loved it. It was good.
It's a good transition, right? They've the old VCU coach, for those who don't know, go listen to our A10 pod when we talk about VCU. Is now at Penn State, and he brought a haul. Oh my goodness! He's brought in Zach Hicks, Favor Air. He brought in Nick Kern. I mean, just off the bat, those are three guys. I know. Did they bring back Andrew Funk as well?
No, they did not bring the Funk. Yeah.
They lost three guys, but I mean, there's a few other names that I know I'm missing, but off the top of my head, those are the three that I remember them bringing in. They absolutely raided the transfer portal past off season. And I mean, look, for a team that has been historically a doormat in the Big Ten, um, and recently has had some success, I think it's really exciting to be a Penn State basketball fan for
They
once.
fucking dogged the transfer portal. Excuse my French, but they just dogged it.
Yeah. They brought in what, 8 guys from the transfer portal?
Brought in Bragi Guzman's son. Sorry. Shout out to Grandvik, Iceland, for that pronunciation. But I mean, DeMarco Dunn coming over from North Carolina. Went out, got Zach Hicks from Temple. Also got Puff Johnson from North Carolina.
Yeah, I
But
was
now,
missing names.
and they got a plethora of players out of that transfer portal, like you said, Baldwin and Kern from VCU. They kind of revitalized this roster. Like they have a legitimate starting five of players that none of which were on this roster last year. Interesting to see, and I think this will be one of those case studies in the entire country where we're looking at, what is the effect of this transfer portal? Is it possible to build a team to win just through the portal?
I mean, you can't get a better study than this. They literally just rated. I mean, these are like the guys that you named are pretty like solid players. I mean, most of these guys that we just rattled off, with the exception of Faber Air, were starters or at worst sixth men for the schools that they're coming. Worst sixth men are coming to Penn State not to just have another fun year. They're coming to win. Like they want to come into the Big Ten and dominate a conference that historically has been tough and Penn State has struggled in mightily, with the exception of last year. Like they're serious about this. And I think it's going to take a little bit for this team to gel. I hope that they made their preseason schedule a bit light so that these top guys get an opportunity to kind of figure out what works, figure out like the ins and outs. But we did see Kansas State have a lot of transfer guys. They were a big transfer portal team last year, and they made a Final Four.
They did exactly that. They got Dell State, Lehigh, St. Francis, Pennsylvania, and Morehead State to start out. Then they played number 15 Texas A&M. That for a ranked team, that's relatively light. We'll talk about Texas A&M here later this week, and you guys will probably get that pop the same week as you get this one. But start out, they go to the ESPN Invitational, and they'll play Texas A&M. They'll play Butler or FAU, and if they keep winning, obviously they'll move up in that. And then they open kind of their regular season, if you consider, some of the other games like Robert Morris they played, and they beat by 10 on last Friday, the 27th. So, I mean, if you're considering post ESPN Invitational, they start out with Bucknell, and then they kind of get in. They got Maryland, they got Ohio State, and they got Georgia Tech, Lemoyne, Rider. So a relatively weak out of conference schedule to start the year, like you're kind of hinting at.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, I mean, look, they've planned the schedule 3 years in advance, but they kind of lucked out because that's really what you need when you have a team that's full of transfers like this. It's going to take time for these guys to learn to play together, because other than Baldwin and Kern and Johnson and I'm blanking, but the other UNC guy, like none of these guys have played together.
Johnson are the two UNC guys.
Done. Right. That's it. But other than that, I mean, none of these guys have played together before. Only Kern and Baldwin have even played for the coach. So, but I'm excited for Penn State. It's going to be a fun experiment, and I think it's going to work.
Yeah, I think they'll be decent. I think they'll definitely stay out of the gutter of this conference. But, like we've been saying, these teams tend to beat each other up all year long. And another team that, took a solid beating last year, but still was able to hang on and have a really successful season, was Northwestern.
I love Boo Buie, both the name and the player. I think he's phenomenal. I think he's a lot of fun. Really can take over games and be kind of, the voice in that team. Audige is a big loss. Chase Audige is a really big loss. I think he is a really, really solid two-way player for that team that I think Boogly, great players, 6'1". They need some sort of length and depth, especially in the backcourt, to kind of, you know, um, work alongside him. And I think Audige is a big loss in that department. So I don't know about Northwestern this year. They weren't the deepest team last year. I don't think they're still not the deepest team in the world this year.
Know who Boo Boo reminds me of?
Oh,
JD Note.
that's a good one. Yeah. Cassius, no, he's not as good of a playmaker as Cassius Winston. JD Note is a better comp.
I pulled that one out of my rear end, that's for sure.
I love JD Note.
Yeah, a great college player, but I mean,
Great college player.
looking at this team as a whole, not great. I mean, they brought in Ryan Landborg from Princeton, who will be a solid backcourt mate. Other than that, they're just kind of relying on younger players to take a step. Luke Hunger's got to take a step. Nick Martinelli has got to take a step. They brought in Blake Barkley, who's a solid player out of Connecticut. Jordan Clayton, who's a solid backup guard to add. Parker Strauss, who's another solid backup guard to add. Where's their front court depth at? I'm curious. We don't have a ton of their front court players on our sheet, but last year they didn't really have any premier guys in the front court, so I'll be curious to see, kind of what their team's going to shake out to be stacking up against some of these dominant front courts in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is that it's not quite as bad as it was last year in terms of the front court. If you're, looking at that kind of stuff, it doesn't look great though. It does not look great. They're running a pretty guard heavy roster. They've got a 7-footer in Matt Nicholson, but it's a pretty guard heavy roster. They're going to struggle against Purdue. They're going to struggle against Michigan. They're going to get crushed by Indiana, I think. They just don't match up well. I don't know, man. I've lost faith the more that we talk about Northwestern on this pod. I'm sorry, guys. You're probably not making the tournament this year. Hate to say it. Them and Nebraska are the two teams that I think are just like, do we have to talk about Nebraska? Can we kind of just?
I mean, they definitely deserve like a little nod, but not too much time. I mean, we could probably sum it up in maybe like 5 sentences or less. They need to get better. They got Fred Hoiberg's son. It's going to be a year in the transfer portal. Eli Rice looks like a solid under the radar type of recruit.
Topanaga's a fun player.
Yeah.
Good shooter.
Western brought back Ty Berry too. I forgot that. Yeah, Matt Nicholson's about as good as it gets in the front court. Luke Hunger's gonna have to take a huge step for Northwestern. Sorry, that was kind of me recapping. I could have sworn I was like, I swear to God, we're missing a player. But no, they really only have one guy who's listed as a big man on their roster. So Northwestern struggle. Nebraska, Matar Diop out of Senegal, 6'10" freshman forward, just your big athletic freshman. We'll be interested to see Romel Lloyd Jr. is a good player last year for them. He's going to be really the reason you watch this team. Blase Keita is another guy like that where it's just, he's going to be really one of the only reasons why you're tuning in to watch Nebraska basketball, unless it's watching them get stomped by one of these other teams that we're talking about.
I was going to say that and took the words right out of my mouth.
It saves. We got Iowa next. I mean, another that is kind of hit or miss depending on how you look at them. They brought in Ben Crick from Valparaiso, who I think
it's a big ad.
In the front court. But I mean, they're really just going to live and die at the right hands of Patrick
McCaffrey. Patrick McCaffrey.
And Peyton Sanford. I mean, they are really just going to live and die on their jump shots, and that's all I have
Yep.
to say about Iowa.
Yep. Iowa's either going to look really good if they're shooting over 35% from three, or really bad if they're shooting under 25% from three. There's not going to be an in between.
They brought in some other good players: Owen Freeman, Lottie Dimbele, and they also brought in Peyton's younger brother Price, who's a 6'7" guard, 95th player in his class. Brought in Brock Harding, who can run some minutes at the backup guard. Brought back Josh Dix. They have a good team. It's just like I said, Patrick McCaffrey, Peyton Sanford. If you guys shoot, I mean, they're annoying as hell to play against. But I mean, they're gritty. They're hard-nosed players. They're gonna get into you on defense. But I mean, if one of them has an incredibly off shooting night and is taking a portion of their shot diet, which they will be, it's just going to be interesting to see kind of what that team's ceiling is. I don't this is not a team that's going to be a great tournament team, but they're a team that could maybe get a couple wins and maybe pull off an upset or get an unexpected game out of someone, especially in the Big Ten tournament. I love McCaffrey. I love Sanford. I love their games, but it's not a complete basketball team.
No. Have we saved the worst for last?
They need better front court depth. That's about it.
Have we saved the worst for last?
We saved the best for last, obviously. It's intended because, how could we, talk about the Big Ten without bringing up just the most dominant team in the conference? Wisconsin Badgers, baby. No. You guys are going to be like, well, Caleb, no doubt that, you have Wisconsin as your dark horse. I do. You got me there. But I have a reason this year. I wasn't on these podcasts last year talking.
Wait, before you continue,
go ahead.
Can we just take a minute before I know what you're gonna say? I just want you to like acknowledge me when you say it. Were you perchance overrating a certain basketball team due to bias last year?
I overrated Wisconsin for a period in time in the season when I thought Chucky Hepburn was an NBA draft prospect.
I would like to hear, I'm sorry, Julian, I will never doubt your Wisconsin doubt ever again. Please.
Sorry, Julian, I will never doubt your Wisconsin doubt again, but this year's not the year to doubt them because they brought in an actual legitimate superstar to supplement the loss of Johnny Davis, which they didn't have last year, and AJ Storr from St. John's, the most underrated transfer in the entire country. Don't know how he was ranked 84th. Should have been a top 15 guy, 6'7" guard with excellent bounce, can put the ball on the floor quite well, defends like an MFer, and he is going to be that perfect go-to guy at the end of the shot clock to get a bucket. But the reality is that he does not have to be the only guy. We have 3 guys that you can get a bucket from at the end of the clock, end of the game, whatever scenario, that can create their own shot or knock down a shot off the catch. And AJ Storr, like I mentioned, Chucky Hepburn, and Connor Sejan. I'm not a big Sejan guy. I think he's a cocky SOB, but I kind of like that in a basketball player sometimes. And, the kid can shoot the cover off the ball. It's hard to hit him for much longer. Chucky Hepburn. I mean, all I have to say about, this core class of Wisconsin guys on the real talk is stay out of the bar. Like, stay out the bar. I see you guys there. Like, flock in this year. You guys have a real chance. Like, this is me talking to the players right now. Like, I'm looking at the camera. This is me talking to the players. You guys have a real chance to be the best team that we've had in a long time. And, your lack of seriousness and maturity is going to be the only thing that weighs you down.
In all seriousness, like I did give you smack for like overrating Wisconsin last year because I did believe that you were. I actually believe.
We have
I actually.
Kaminsky and Crowell. We have our Sam Decker and Wall. We have those stability pieces. We have Max Klesman who can come in, knock down a shot. And then we brought in the two youngsters, or really three youngsters. We brought in Nolan Winter, Gus Yalden, and John Blackwell. All three guys ranked within the top 200. That's not something you see out of Wisconsin that often. We're not a team to go out and grab, a handful of highly ranked players because they generally don't want to come in and sit behind seniors and juniors. But these guys are going to come in. They're going to take their bumps and bruises in practice. And I think when the time comes to it, we're going to see good minutes out of Yeldon. We're going to see great minutes out of Winter. We're going to see minutes out of Blackwell. He's a 6'4" guard. And the reality is this team reminds me of that Frank Kaminsky and Sam Decker team with Bronson Koenig, Douye Dukin, Vito Brown, all these
Nigel Hayes
pieces that were able to fuel a championship caliber team, and they could do it. They could do it this year. I think that if they take themselves seriously enough, I haven't even talked about, Carter Gilmore, who, is one of the top 5 players in the entire country in assist to turnover ratio, as much as I may hate it. But, they have guys that are going to come in and play their role, even though he can't guard anybody. He's going to come in, not make mistakes. We have a team that is deep. We can compete. It's just a matter of how much these guys want to win. And I think if this Wisconsin team wants to win, it's going to be hard for me to keep them out of a conversation of being a top 32 team in the country consistently throughout the year.
For once, and trust me, last year I was lambasting and roasting and terrorizing Caleb for his Wisconsin takes. I actually agree. Maybe not to the level that I think you're putting them on, but I do think they are going to be a legitimate team in the Big Ten this year. I think they can make a decent run in the tournament. I mean, they brought back a lot of their key guys.
They didn't lose a single key player. I texted Chucky Hepburn in the offseason. I'm like, you guys got a real chance this year. I saw you're coming back. And I'm like, I saw Wall is coming back. You guys are legit. And then he texted me, he said, Max and Steven are back too. We ready.
Yeah, I mean, look,
they're
going to be.
Let's see it then. You guys got rid of the clown that is Jordan Davis. You guys were able to keep Kamari McGee from transferring away when you guys didn't play him at all. So let's see some good Kamari McGee minutes this year. Let's see some good, Chucky Hepburn shot making. Let's see some consistent shooting out of Connor Essegian, making free throws. Stop being such a cocky MFer, bro. Get over yourself. Just play basketball. Stay home on a Friday night for once, will ya?
Oh my God. This was hilarious. I'm so glad we saved Wisconsin for last. Can we talk about the NBC now?
Yeah, we can. I just had to say it. Somebody has to say it. And we'll probably clip this. This will be the first thing that we ever put out individually. And I'll say it loud and proud. I go to Wisconsin. I see these guys on a regular basis, and I know their character just by being around them. I know their character. I know the type of guys that these kids are. They're smart kids. And when they see opportunities in front of them that are too easy to not take advantage of, they will take advantage. It's just a matter of them being smart enough and focused enough to look at the opportunities and realize that they have a moment. Go take it. This conference is good, but it's not that good. Purdue is not that good this year. And they were undoubtedly the team to beat in this conference last year, and they're going to return their best player and one of the best players in the country. Illinois is solid, but you guys have depth. You guys have positional switchability. You guys can run a bunch of different lineups. You can run 3-guard lineups. You can run 2-guard lineups. You can run 4-guard lineups. Heck, you guys can play small ball. You can play big. You can match up with a lot of these teams in the country. It's just a matter of, will your guards keep their heads on straight off the court and on the court?
We let you get on your soapbox there, buddy.
We're done.
Tucker DeVries.
It's the Missouri Valley Conference starts and ends with Tucker DeVries.
Whoa.
There's really a big four of players in this conference, in terms of talking NBA draft wise. there's some guys that we love, guys that we've had on the channel in this conference. A shout out to Roberts. If you're sticking around at this point in the pod, Ethan Roberts is that dude. Go check out the War Room episode that I did with him. High quality individual, top transfer for both of us in the conference, and a big reason why I had them have the top recruiting class. I think they brought in some other talent, but great kid. I think he deserves, a little spot in this podcast just to get some props. We'll maybe talk about him when we get around to Drake. Which we might lead with Drake right now.
That's what I was thinking, dude.
Breeze is one of the premium scorers in the country. And it's hard to look past his size, his ability to do all the little things. I talked for a minute there. I need to catch my breath. I'll kind of turn the floor over to you to talk about Tucker DeVries for a sec.
Look, man, Tucker DeVries does two things very, very well. He plays smart and he makes jump shot. Like I don't really think that I need to say a lot about Tucker DeVries. He's a really, really talented offensive player. Some of the shots that he hits are just absolutely ridiculous. They've also brought back Darnell Brody, who I think is going to be big for catching Tucker's misses off the glass. And Coach DeVries has done a really, really good job with this Drake team. Like, they were the best team in the MVC last year. I don't think, as long as they've got Tucker, I think it's really tough for anyone to say that they're not going to be the best team in the conference this year. I know we're going to talk about Bradley, and Bradley's got a lot of talent too. And Brian Wardle's done it. Wardle, not Wordle like the game. Wardle has done a phenomenal job. But look, Tucker's the best player in the conference, and a conference that's smaller like this one, a lot of the times the best player in the conference is enough to win it.
Yeah, I agree. I think you summed it up well. I mean, beyond the Ethan Roberts point, I mean, they brought in Kevin Overton, who should be a solid freshman out of Kansas. Brought in Patrick Bath, who's a solid forward out of Kansas. Or not Kansas, out of Minneapolis, another one of these Minneapolis kids. They got a good hoop scene coming up, lately. So I'm liking what I'm seeing out of them. I think they'll be good, but they're really going to live and die by Tucker. He led them to, the tournament last year. So it'll be interesting to see what they can do this year.
Yeah. They're not the team I'm most excited about.
Let's hear it.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I love me some Bradley Bears, man. I love me some Bradley Bears. Here's the thing with Bradley is they've got two guys that are very, very exciting. One who is probably my favorite draft sleeper in the entire class. Like sleeper, not just like sleeper, like Jalen Slauson sleeper, and Malevi Leons, who, for the record, although they lost in the championship game to Drake, this kid shut down Tucker DeVries for 90% of the game. He might what?
He might be the Slauson of this class. An automatically eligible guy who's got good length, positional switchability, can shoot the ball, can pass the ball, has good mobility, can do a little bit of everything. He maybe doesn't have the plus athleticism like the sneaky bounce, but he makes up for it with maybe a little bit better length and size than Slauson.
Such an elite defender, man. I mean, they've also got Darius Hannah, who I also really, really like.
Super freak.
Just long, athletic dude. And I think that, with those two guys, honestly, and they have a few more guys. I honestly
bet they lost Zach Montgomery. He was a guy that last year, just a bucket getter at the end of the game, but they really didn't utilize him enough. They're really committed to Duke Dean as kind of their lead guard. Christian Davis is a great player who I think can take a step and be a really impact player. Almar Adelson's coming in. Ahmet Jonovic is taking another year, returning back, 7'1" big man. A big body in any one of these conferences, these lower major conferences, are going to help you out. He might be the only 7-footer that we have in this conference. Yeah, he is. The only 7-footer that we have on our dock that we have, where we have a good chunk of players from every team that are at least on our radar scouting wise. Ahmet Janovic is the only one who's a 7-footer.
Look, it's a small conference. Brody, I think Brody's 6'10", but he's not a 7-footer. I think another big guy I really want to talk about. I know we're gonna kind of gloss over the MVC a little bit because we've been going pretty long, but I think Ravi Avila at least deserves a mention here. Phenomenal 6'10" big, just like so good in the post, really, really good rim protector, really solid rebounder. And I think he was either freshman of the year, he was on the all freshman team. I can't quite remember, but for Indiana State, I know they may not be like, the darling of the conference, but
1.13
Avila's
possession, 1.87 assist or turnover ratio, 59.5% effective field goal percentage. Shot it from 3 a little bit, shot around 33%. So can stretch the floor a little bit, the big man spot. Really like what you want out of a hub in college basketball. That's my Robbie Avila soapbox.
I love Ravi Avila. I honestly think there's a world where if Tucker DeVries didn't exist, easily him or Malevy Leons could be Conference Player of the Year. But Tucker DeVries exists, so it's tough. Northern Iowa's interesting too, just because they're bringing back so many guys. Obviously, Bowen Bourne was like the leading scorer, one of the leading scorers in the conference. They got a guy Landon Wolf I really like. We got Titan Anderson coming back.
Titan Anderson
I think they
do it all. I like him a lot.
they returned what, like 9 guys from their roster last year?
Probably even
Something
more.
like, yeah. So they'll be interesting to see how they develop. I know in the past they've kind of had these teams that come into, late February, early March and like surprise somebody in tournament play. Um, I mean, other than that, it's pretty much what, like Murray State, Valpo.
Shout out Jordan Davis. I know I just trashed you, but shout out Jordan Davis.
Is where Illinois State, Southern Illinois,
Yeah, Illinois State.
Illinois State.
I mean, I guess some of the other notable players like Kenny Strawbridge Jr. for Evansville is a good guy. Can get a bucket whenever you need it. Obviously, we talked about Ethan Roberts. Another guy that I really like, at least from a draft perspective. I liked him a little bit more last year, but I think that's funny. I think I liked him a little bit more last year when he was a sophomore, but the 6'6" guard out of Missouri State, Chance Moore, is a
He's good.
who can do a little bit of everything, put ball in hoop, can really defend, get after it on that side of the ball. Really want to see him improve his efficiency playmaking wise. Only a 0.46 assist to turnover ratio, which is quite ugly. But shot it pretty well from 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he can get his own shot pretty well. He's just got to be more careful with the ball. I definitely was watching this film and saw some pretty ugly turnovers
from 3, so that's definitely an improvement area. But yeah, should be a good player. Another guy that's a great shooter for Indiana State, at least, Julian Larry, shot around 45% last year on low volume. Should be a guy to watch out for. Another foreign player, Agustinas Kirdoulas for Indiana State. Sorry, I'm tired. My pronunciation has gone down the toilet. But it is what it is. That's what you get when you get me talking about Wisconsin basketball. Obviously you mentioned Murray State. They'll be a good team. Definitely not the talent that we've seen in the past. But a team that's always going to be able to get the job done, and will have somebody kind of come out of the woodworks to be an impact player and maybe get himself a Power 5 or a high major offer in the transfer portal. Lots of talent. I mean, the one team that we didn't talk about, which I think is probably the only team that I would probably take over Bradley or Drake preseason, is Belmont.
Yeah.
Bringing back Cade Tyson, who's a legitimate draft prospect at 6'7", can shoot the cover off the ball. Hunter Tyson's younger brother, was a freshman of the year finalist, Mr. North Carolina, Mr. Basketball 2 years ago. Just a really good player that can kind of do everything you want in a star. brought in some other good talent around him, brought back some other guys. Jacoby Gillespie was 2022 Mr. Tennessee Mr. Basketball. So, got some highly touted high school players. Malik Diaz, a great player out of Vanderbilt. They were able to bring in as well, who I think is probably one of my favorites for a defensive player of the year. But shout out to my defensive player of the year, Toby Okani, who is a guard. I mean, Malevi Leons was too easy of a pick. But I think he's a phenomenal guard who can guard 1 through 4 and really do a little bit of everything. Also for Missouri State, shout out to Tyler Bay, who is a dog out there. He's probably going to be one of the highly touted freshmen in this conference who's going to get a lot of minutes. I mean, shout out to Chase Walker, who, for Illinois State, notably is a big fella coming in at 290. I just thought that was really notable. I mean, he's a big body that I'm going to want to check out really early on and see what he can do as a freshman. Anytime you get a 6'9" kid who's like 290, you kind of wonder what he could look like without the weight. So I'll be curious to see what his skill set looks like as he goes through college and can drop some of that weight. Could be a pretty muscular dude at some point in his college career. I think this will just be a fun conference to watch. I'm just kind of running through it to give an idea to people of what things are out there to watch in terms of college basketball. You got Ganar Bielu for Bradley, who's the older brother of Omaha Bielu, who we mentioned earlier in the podcast, who's playing for Iowa State at Bradley. So, Darius Hannah, we mentioned. Demarion Birch is also out of Milwaukee, which is the same hometown as Darius Hannah. He was the 3rd ranked player in Wisconsin as a recruit. So, lots of talent. It's a relatively undercovered and underrated conference in a draft sense. I mean, just not a lot of these guys that come out here are going to be like highly touted prospects by any means. But I mean, just from a pure college basketball perspective, this is another conference that has great parity, very similar to the Big Ten, that I think will be fun to watch if you have some free time. And our teams that you should watch out for the tournament. I think Belmont, Bradley, and Drake are all going to be teams that can provide, an early round upset. If Missouri State turns out good, Donovan Clay comes back and has another great year for them. Donovan Hunter comes in, has a good season. Some things turn right. Tyler Bay is fantastic. Chance Moore figures out how to not turn the ball over. They could be a really good team. You mentioned Northern Iowa. They brought back so many returners. Titan Anderson, like you said, Michael Doe, Landon Wolf, Kyle Pock, Bowen Bourne, all guys who can put ball and hoop and do a little bit of everything on the defensive end, and are going to provide like a brand of basketball that's at least enjoyable to watch. They're going to be a very cohesive team, and I mean, it tends to be in all sports. Teams that are cohesive are going to come out and win early. So I'll be curious to see how the season starts for a team like Northern Iowa. Just lots to watch this year. That's really all I got. I'm slumped from that Wisconsin.
I'm just excited about. I didn't think I would be as excited about the Missouri Valley as I was, because I mean, like off the bat, you kind of think like Tucker DeVries, Drake. All right, that's the conference, right? And it still technically is the case. But the more that you kind of take a look at some of these other teams in the conference, the Missouri Valley is going to be fun this year, guys. Like we have said our piece about other conferences that we don't think are going to be that good, or they're like this. If we don't think a conference is going to be more than 1 or 2 teams deep, we'll say that. I think the Missouri Valley is 5 or 6 teams deep, and I'm really excited to get to watch it this year. I'm gonna be pushing the Malevi Leons as a draft pick train all season.
I'll be right there with you. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to the first solo. And we are off a call.